Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, we are at our final New York Giants game review of the 2024-2025 NFL season. Ed Valentine here with you, along with Tony DelGenio of Big Blue View. And Tony, it's finally over.
Yep.
Finally done.
Yep. The beating has stopped.
The beating has stopped, but these are the Giants, and I'm sure that the beatings will continue in some way, shape, or form. They always do. So let's not count our chickens and all that before they hatch and all that stuff. I have to start with this before we even get into any game review today. I did not see this game today. I honest to God did not see this game today. I live in upstate New York, which I'm sure a lot of folks are aware. This is the first time in my lifetime that I can remember, and I'm sure it's happened somewhere along the way, but this is the first time in my lifetime that I can remember the New York Giants not being on television in New York State. CBS had the game today and showed Bills Patriots. And I'll be darned, I real quick signed up for one streaming service. They weren't showing the game. I canceled my subscription and went and signed up for a free trial on another streaming service. That one wasn't carrying the game. I checked YouTube TV, where Chris Flum of Big Blue View said he was watching the game on YouTube TV because Chris is down in South Carolina, I believe. And YouTube TV wanted me to sign up for NFL Sunday Ticket, and I wasn't going to do that either. So I just listened to Bob Papa and Carl Banks, and then I real quick went to NFL Plus when the game was over and watched the condensed replay. So I have kind of sort of seen it, but Tony, that's the state of the New York Giants. They would rather show Bills Patriots than Giants Eagles. So that just tells you a little bit about where we are.
Yeah, I guess there's some argument given where you are. You're kind of roughly equidistant between Buffalo and Boston, I guess, and so I thought to split the difference. But they do. But I can assure you didn't miss anything great.
No, I could see that. It's Giants Eagles with, and I should have known, Tony. I should have known that the Eagles backups would be better than the Giants backups, because let's be real, the Giants were playing largely backups. The Eagles, by necessity, the Giants playing backups by necessity, the Eagles playing backups by choice. And we should have known that the Eagles backups would be better than the Giants backups.
Yeah, and it figures, of course. But all's well that ends well. They wound up with the number 3 pick in the draft, which isn't too bad. They came in with number 4 in the day. So
yeah, it's over. Let's talk about that. I mean, all things considered, I know people are all upset still that they won a game and they blew the number 1 pick and all of that. There's nothing wrong with number 3. I mean, if you look at the 3 players who are most likely to be the top 3 draft picks, you're either going to get one of the 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, or you're going to get the best player in this draft in Travis Hunter, who could be something the Giants desperately need, which is a number 1 shutdown cornerback. So it's not so bad. And, we'll debate all off season about the quarterback stuff, but number 3 is not a bad place to be.
No, I think and it's better than some of the alternatives that were in play when the day began. They could have gone as low as number 9. So to actually have moved up 1 is not bad.
And I wouldn't have been terribly upset, because neither of the quarterbacks in this draft are guys that you're just absolutely dying to have. I know some people love Cam Ward, and I probably prefer Ward at this point to Shedeur Sanders just because of the upside, and because I'm an old fogey, and some of the stuff that comes with Shedeur Sanders kind of bothers me. So that is what it is, and we'll see what the Giants think of it. But I wouldn't necessarily have minded picking 6, 7, somewhere in there, maybe trading trading down, picking a quarterback on day 2, and and we'll see. So so it is what it is. 3's not so bad. Just you have any early thoughts on that top 3?
Yeah, I agree that the best player in this draft is Hunter. I mean, he's you can imagine having him on your team, and as you say, potential to be your CB1, and that would allow you to, let's say, move Deonte Banks over to CB2 and hope that he'd fare a little better there than against other teams' wide receiver ones. And then you could also bring him in receiver packages. I mean, not that he can play 90 snaps a game or something like that, but you could bring him in certain receiver packages and have him on the other side of the field from Malik Neighbors, and that would be a pretty interesting duo to have out there. So he's certainly an intriguing guy to have if he's the guy who falls to number 3. I don't think anybody would be upset if that was how things wound up. That's a potentially awfully good player to get on your team, and someone that, were it not for the fact that quarterback is such a dominant position now in the NFL, in the old days, Travis Hunter would have been clearly the number 1 draft pick. I think it's just that now, quarterback seems to people like 90% of the game. So that's why he may not be.
Yeah, it just becomes, it's so important to have a good one, but it's also important. It's hard to get the quarterback position right.
Right. That's
and
right.
and it's going to be hard for the Giants to justify passing on a quarterback if one of those guys is available, for the simple reason that this is the second year in a row that they've been in position to draft one. They need one desperately, and they passed last year. So it's going to be difficult for them to justify it if you pass again. So but we'll see what happens. We'll see if they have the opportunity.
And as for the other the two quarterbacks, this consider this a non-expert opinion, okay? But of the two, I prefer Cam Ward for a couple of reasons. I have to admit, I saw both of these guys last year, actually, and not just this season. But I didn't know anything about Cam Ward until I decided to watch. I believe it was either the Washington State game or the Oregon-Washington State game, and I was there to watch, for whichever game it was. I was there to watch either Penix or Knicks, whichever game it was that I was thinking of, and I really didn't know anything about Washington State. And I'm watching the game and watching Washington State hang in there, with whichever team it was they were playing that day, and saying, "Wow, the quarterback for Washington State is pretty good." And I had to look him up and things like that. And I said, "He's an interesting guy, So I've had my eye on Cam Ward for a while, and I saw Shedeur Sanders, also, but in my opinion, Cam Ward's got the stronger arm, and I feel like he reacts to pressure better, but I'm wary of actually reaching that conclusion, because the problems with the Shedeur Sanders evaluation is that the Colorado offensive line was in a league with last year's Giants offensive line. I mean, they were just awful, and he was running for his life the entire time. What I don't like about Shedeur Sanders, other than the fact that I don't think his arm is all that strong, by the way. I think Cam Ward definitely has the stronger arm. But the thing that I worry about Shedeur Sanders is that his response to pressure is immediately to go back and try to run around and try to create something great out of a dismal situation. And he winds up taking these huge losses where he's running around back there and constantly, he'll take a 15-20 yard sack or something like that. And again, he wouldn't be doing that if he were playing against a good offensive line. But when you get to the NFL, behind a good offensive line, but in the NFL, you're going to get those situations. And I get the sense that he really needs work in what his first response to the pressure is. And so I worry that's going to be a problem for him in the NFL. And but I'm picking at straws, and that's the one thing I guess that I think I can conclude out of this entire NFL season is that we spend the entire college year and the months leading up to the draft picking apart these quarterbacks, every little thing about them, to come up with a reason why we should or should not draft them. And you look at the guys who came out this year, and of the 6 main guys who came out, the one that almost everybody had as their 6th quarterback out of the 6th was Bo Nix. Bo Nix has had a really good season for Denver, and he's I guess the game is probably over by now, or if not, it's about to be over. But he completed almost every pass that he threw in the first half today against Kansas City, and threw 3 touchdowns. And he looks definitely like an NFL quarterback. And so there are lessons that maybe we need to learn about these players that we don't learn well enough when we're picking them apart. So I think we have to be a little bit circumspect in my own opinion on these guys matters nothing, but the people who actually decide who to pick and why. I worry that people are dissecting these quarterbacks too much and not taking a bigger view of what they might be able to accomplish, how much experience they have, and how much adversity they've faced, and so on and so forth. So I think the bottom line, since you just don't know which of these quarterbacks is ever going to be good coming out of college into the NFL, you just say, when I find myself in a position, take one of them. If I need a quarterback, which the Giants clearly do, take one of them. And if one of those 2 guys drops to you, take them, whichever one it is. If one of those 2 guys does not drop to you, then you've got the 2nd pick in the 2nd round, and there might be a good one there that you can take, or you can trade back up into the bottom of the 1st round, whatever. Sure. Take a Milroe, take a Jackson Dart, just take a Ewers, whatever, and just get yourself a quarterback so that you have somebody that you at least has a chance of being your guy.
All right, Tony, we just got a question from the Big Moo in the inbox here in the chat. And he's asking why the Giants get the 2nd pick in the 2nd round after locking up the 3rd pick overall in the 1st round. And to my understanding, the way that it works is there are 3 teams with the same record at the top. And it's Titans, it's Browns, it's Giants. And the way that I understand it is from the 2nd round on, there is a sort of rotation of how those top 3 will pick, simply because they all have the same record. So there will be, in the 3rd round, the order will be a little different than it is in the 2nd round.
The Giants in the 3rd round.
Pardon me?
It'll be Giants first in the 3rd round. Yeah.
The Giants first.
The Giants 3rd in round 1, 2nd in round 2, and 1st in round 3.
Right. And then I don't know, does it continue in round 4?
I don't remember whether it continues beyond the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I'm trying as we speak. I'm trying to look up the full draft order here, but let's see if I can do that real quick. So in the 4th round, right, it goes back to that rotation in the 4th round, where the Giants will have the 3rd pick in the 4th round. So that rotation does continue But that's the reason, is because of these three teams having the same record. There's a rotation there. So I'm glad we could clear that up for you. I hope that helps you understand that one a little bit more. Tony, before we let's actually move on and let's talk about the topic du jour, which is what happens next, of course. What happens with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen? Personally, I've believed for a while now that Joe Schoen is safe. Sounds like from the reporting from Adam Schefter and Jay Glazer on Sunday morning that the belief is that Brian Daboll is going to stay. I don't know that that's going to be the ultimate decision, but it leans that way. Everybody who reads Big Blue View knows that I'm okay with that. I mean, it's not ideal to keep a head coach who's gone 9-25 over the last 2 years. But I think that because you're not going to get Mike Vrabel, especially now that the Patriots have preemptively fired Gerard Mayo. The Jets have already interviewed Mike Vrabel. You're not getting Mike Vrabel, who I think is the big prize in this head coaching hiring cycle. You're just not getting Vrabel. So other than that, you're probably looking at untried first-time head coaches again. And are you sure that that's going to be any better? I just don't know. So I'm okay with it. If it comes down that way, are you okay with it as well?
Yeah, I am. I'm all right with that. I've been going back and forth as to what I thought would happen and what I wanted to happen. So what I will say about Daboll is that they did not quit on him, right? And there are things that make you feel that the players have given up. I mean, I felt that by the last 2 weeks of the Joe Judge era, that not only the players, but I thought the coaches had more or less given up. And I didn't see that. I mean, obviously they had a couple of bad losses down the stretch. I'll throw out the Tampa Bay game, and I'll just say that was, I think, everybody all the players at least, being in shock about Daniel Jones being gone, and that had an effect on them, and they just were
Absolutely.
not ready to play that day, and whatever the reason is for that, they just weren't ready to play that day because of what had happened. But other than that, they played a poor game in Atlanta. But most of their games, they hung in there, and and today was an example. Granted, they're playing mostly the other team's backups, right? But they hung in against New Orleans. They didn't play well against Baltimore, but Baltimore has been doing that to a lot of teams. I mean, Baltimore is a Super Bowl contender. They certainly played well against Indianapolis, especially on offense, right? And so you listen to the players, at least that have ventured opinions this week in the press, and the prevailing opinion among those players seems to be that they like Daboll and they think he should stay. So the other thing is that we don't know what John Mara has been telling Daboll and Schoen behind the scenes about what he wants out of them, what he wants in terms of, in terms of what they should do about quarterback and so on and so forth. That you could see during Hard Knocks that he certainly was there expressing opinions while they were evaluating what to do. I mean, he let them know that he'd feel terrible if Saquon left and so on and so forth. So you don't know what role he plays in all of that, and that's the hard thing from the outside, I think, to imagine. But I think I'm anticipating that Daboll and Schoen both come back, and not the least of which is that Mara I don't know about Tish, but Mara at least, may be tired of the merry-go-round in the front office and wants to have some measure of stability. And if he doesn't think that these guys are incapable of doing it, then I'm guessing that his gut reaction is going to be to keep them and give them a chance to get their quarterback and get things straightened out.
And I want to, as I'm watching the comments here, and I want to mention one thing that I saw in the comments. Daboll and Schoen have 5-year deals, which means they have 2 more years left on their contracts. One of the things that I have said repeatedly is that this decision has to largely be about whoever that next quarterback is going to be. It has to be about putting that next quarterback in the best possible situation. I think that if you are keeping Brian Daboll for 2025, your intention is to allow Schoen and Daboll to finish out their contracts through 2025 and 2026, because what you don't want is what has happened in Chicago this year, where they drafted a quarterback and Matt Eberflus, the head coach, got fired before that quarterback's rookie season was even over with. Same thing happened to Bryce Young in Carolina. Bryce Young is beginning to work his way through that now, but that's not a good thing for a quarterback. This is what happened to Daniel Jones. The Giants, and I don't know what kind of quarterback Daniel Jones could have been at his ceiling per se, but the Giants drafted Daniel Jones. A year later, Pat Shurmur got fired. And then he goes through Pat Shurmur, he goes through Joe Judge, and then he went through Brian Daboll. He went through 2 general managers. So you want to provide a stable runway for that quarterback if and when you bring him in, and that has to be part of the decision. So I don't think it's John Maris just saying, he's got 1 more year. I think it's John Maris saying we're going to let him draft the quarterback and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think if anything saves Daboll, it's that first season when he got a team with very little talent into the playoffs and actually won a playoff game. And if anything saves Schoen, it's that his 2024 draft looks good. I see the comment about his first 2 drafts being a disaster, and I won't go quite that far, but they certainly weren't good. I mean, he did get a few good players in those drafts, but the highest profile players all wound up being disappointments, and those are the ones that naturally count the most. So I think he did better with the 2024 draft. I don't think anyone is disappointed in having Malik Neighbors on the team.
No.
I mean he's been I think he's been even better than I expected him to be. I mean he's made a seamless transition to the pros, and the fact that he was able to accomplish as much as he did this year with no good quarterback on the team throwing to him most of the time, no quarterback on the team who could really hit and get him on those intermediate to deeper routes where he really showed a lot of proficiency when he was catching passes from Jaden Daniels at LSU. The fact that he did what he did is amazing. But also, I mean, throughout that draft, Drew Phillips looks like a really good player. I think Newman has promise. Theo Johnson has promise. Tyrone Tracy looks like a very good player. Even Muasau, sixth round pick, looks like a useful backup player on the team. So maybe Schoen had some learning to do as a GM. As his first time as a GM, and maybe he had to learn as well. And you see that with GMs. There are good GMs. You look at Minnesota, and Adolfo Mensah had a terrible first draft for Minnesota as well. I think it might be that not one of his first players on the draft is even still on the team, or if they are on the team, not a single one of them is even starting for the Vikings from his first draft. But somehow he's gotten the Vikings 2 years later to turn them into one of the best teams in the NFL. So maybe you have to be patient with people who are doing the job for the first time, and that applies to Daboll as well. As experienced as he is as a coach, he hasn't had the experience of being a head coach. And while he makes some head scratching decisions, as far as I'm concerned. Uh, uh, Today, I didn't understand going for it on fourth down at midfield, but it didn't bother me that much because it was early in the game. But
I think that was just, it's week 18. The heck with it. It's
yeah,
week
right.
18. We're just gonna do this.
Let's just do it.
I want to say about Malik Neighbors, congratulations to Malik Neighbors. The kid is a wonderful talent. Obviously set the Giants single season franchise record for receptions today, past Steve Smith's 2009 mark of 107. Ended up with more than 1,200 receiving yards for the season. Is a wonderful talent. And you do just look at it and say, when they can get him a good quarterback, when they get him a guy that can deliver him the ball in places where he can really do things with it. And honestly, a little bit the same for Wan'Dale Robinson, who had finished the year with 93 catches, I think. But, he averaged about 6 inches a catch. and largely that's because the only way the Giants can get him the ball is if they're throwing it to him when he's facing the quarterback and he's standing still.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can ever figure out how to get him the ball when he's actually moving, he's a kid who can make some plays in the open field. But, back to Neighbors, you do wonder what he'll be able to do. I mean, can he be Jamar Chase if he gets a Joe Burrow? He's pretty darn close to that already, to be honest with you. Can he be that guy? But here's the thing, and I have had my issues at times with some of the things that Neighbors has said, and going to the concert when he had the concussion, was maybe not medically an issue, but it certainly looked, the optics of that weren't great. But look at this kid. Tony, 2 weeks ago, I was in the Giants locker room and I was standing there talking to somebody, and Malik Neighbors walked by. And for me to say walked by is being generous. He hobbled by. He could barely walk to go from his locker to the shower. And then he went out last week and did what he did against the Indianapolis Colts. And then he played again today in a meaningless game, got that record, went to the sideline, and I think we all thought he was done, got the record. And then all of a sudden, he's back in the game in the fourth quarter with the Giants down by 2 touchdowns, and he's catching a 45-yard touchdown pass where he did some amazing gymnastics. The best thing about this kid, I said it to somebody while I was at the Giants facility the other day. The best thing about this kid is just by his actions, just by him dragging himself to the field the way that he has. And Brian Burns has done the same thing all year long. Drag himself to the field and produce at a high level when he hasn't been anywhere near fully healthy. Malik Neighbors is setting the standard for what the Giants need to be. He is setting the culture. He is setting the expectation. And for me, he's the youngest kid on the roster, and for me, that's the most impressive thing, is the mentality of what he's doing, going out there and just, no matter what his body feels like, just going out there and doing what he does.
Yeah. And, I think that he's become a leader on the team. And that's not something you generally expect from a rookie, unless they're a quarterback, and a lot of times not even the quarterback becomes a leader that quickly. I don't think a wide receiver is generally a leader on the team. And I don't, at the beginning I worried that he might be ill suited to that role because he does have a little bit of an edge to him, right? But as the year went on, I thought he got really good at handling the constant attention of the press.
I thought he got better. Yes.
And I thought, for someone, as you say, that young, I mean, not just a rookie in the NFL, but that young in calendar age, put into a situation with the New York press, which must be the hardest press to deal with in the NFL.
I'm a nice guy, Tony. I never ask hard questions.
Well, I can think of a couple of people who asked
Let's
different
let's
different
let's
questions.
let's not name anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Daily News, ESPN. Let's not, but anyway.
but you know, but but I but I really enjoyed listening to him as the season went on, handling the questions he got from the press, and I just thought, wow, this kid is pretty mature for someone that young, and as you say, he's gotten beaten up over the course of the season, and you could imagine him, being one of these cancers in the locker room after coming from this wildly successful program and season at LSU. And then he comes into the Giants and they're winning 3 games all year. You could imagine this guy becoming a problem in the locker room right away. But instead, he hasn't seemed from the outside to have done that at all. In fact, it seemed just the opposite. I think he's clearly the best of that group of top three wide receivers that came into the NFL this year as rookies. The only guy that can compare to him is his LSU teammate Brian Thomas Jr., who's had a
Which I didn't see
tremendous.
coming. I did not see that coming this
No,
quickly.
I thought he looked really good too, but I wouldn't have predicted that Brian Thomas Jr. would have had as good a year as he had. And props to him. I mean, that LSU program for wide receivers is something. Anyway, I think the solace that Giants fans can take from being now in the position of having to look for a quarterback again and not having taken one in the previous draft is that the guy that they did take. All right, we always talk about, you should not draft for need, you should take the best player available. And I mean, my opinion is that at number 6, Malik Neighbors was the best player available. And I mean, if he's not, I don't know who was. I guess you could say Brock Bowers, but I honestly think a wide receiver is a more valuable part of the team than a tight end is. So I don't mind them not taking Brock Bowers, as great a season as he's having to. So, that's a situation where I don't blame them for going the direction that they did.
Yeah, it's fun. I talked to a draft analyst on the show the other day, and forgive me, I can't remember, because I've talked to a few different guys, but I can't remember who said this to me. But you're thinking about the combination of Malik Neighbors, and if you get a quarterback this year, whether it's Malik Neighbors and Shadur Sanders, or Malik Neighbor and Cam Ward, or Malik Neighbors and Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart in the second round. And the point that was made was Malik Neighbors is so good that Malik Neighbors plus whatever quarterback you get in this upcoming draft is probably a better combination than JJ McCarthy and whatever wide receiver you could have added for him in this upcoming draft. So you wind up in a better place.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Yeah. And you look at what Sam Darnold has done this year for Minnesota. And how is he able to do that? Well, certainly he must have gotten good coaching from Kevin O'Connell, right? Who seems to have done a great job there. But he's also throwing to Justin Jefferson, and so and he's got Hawkinson, he's got Addison, and so he's got a great receiving core to throw to, and a good offensive line as well to sit behind. So that has to be part of the reason for Darnold's success, in addition to the coaching he's gotten and the offense that O'Connell runs for them. And so you imagine them bringing in a quarterback at number 6 and throwing to mostly the guys that were there, last year, and it's not going to be the same, right? They're not going to have the same. And as much as the offensive line has improved this year over last year, and it has, it's still not a great offensive line, right? And so they're still getting significant pressure when the quarterback drops back to pass, and it's because they've filled a couple of holes, but not all the holes are filled yet on the offensive line, especially in pass protection. So I think, given what they have, I think to accomplish what Neighbors has accomplished is just amazing, and it's telling me something that the national press seems to recognize that also, right? I mean, he
Mhm.
didn't make the Pro Bowl team, but he did make it as a second alternate. And you hear the national press rave about him all the time. And ordinarily on a team as bad as the Giants, they're not going to pay any attention to some wide receiver who's playing well for them. But everybody else around the country is raving about what he's done too. So that's telling me that they really have something special there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Big Moo is asking who we think the top 3 picks are going to be in the draft, and I think we've pretty much established that we think, unless there's an upset, that the top 3 picks are Sanders, Ward, and Travis Hunter. Um,
And the
I,
question is in what order?
right.
And one of the questions that's been raised is Cleveland going to take a quarterback? And it's actually kind of an interesting question, because as dire as their quarterback situation has been, the fact is they're still committed to Deshaun Watson for 2 more years with his mega contract. And you wonder whether they're willing to give up on him when they owe him that much money, or whether they're going to go 1 more year with him, or whether they're going to play the game of trying to draft a quarterback in round 2 to train to take over when Watson's 2 years are up. How they're actually going to handle it. Tennessee, it's hard for me to imagine that Tennessee is not going to take one of the quarterbacks.
And for what it's worth, also, 4 months ahead of time, 4.5 months ahead of time, for what it's worth, what I saw today is that the Titans are all over Cam Ward. So for what it's worth, and who knows what that's going to be,
Mhm.
After the draft process plays itself out, because how many for how many months did we hear that the Giants were all over JJ McCarthy?
Mhm.
So who knows? But that's the word that was out there today, was that the Titans are all over Cam Ward. So, which would leave the Giants with Shedeur Sanders at 3 if he's there.
Right.
The other interesting part of that question, Tony, becomes, we know how good a player Travis Hunter is, but we also know if those first 2 quarterbacks are gone, the Giants could take a quarterback on day 2. They could take Jalen Milroe, who looked like he belonged on somebody's JV team the other day in the bowl game. So that didn't give you any confidence. They could take Jackson Dart. They could take, Carson Beck. They could take somebody, but there's no guarantee with any of those guys. So it leaves you in a situation where you might be in the quarterback market in 2026 as well.
Yeah.
And the thing for me about that is, do you start to plan for that by looking at that number 3 pick and saying, we had a lot of holes. Travis Hunter's a great player, but let's compile some assets. Maybe let's get 2 players that we could use this year. Let's add some assets into the 2026 draft in case we have to move around to go get a quarterback that we want in 2026. So do you use that asset to get more assets instead of just get 1 player? I think it would be a fascinating decision.
Yeah, and there's a lot of facets to that in my mind. First of all, taking a quarterback outside round 1, and again we see this over and over again, that guys taken after day 1 become something in the NFL that we didn't imagine they could become, seeing their tape in college. And the problem is it's very spotty, so you never know when you're going to get one of those guys, right? But today, if you were looking for an example, if you're watching the highlights of the New England game, uh, you had Joe Milton out there, right? And Joe Milton is this guy, right, with a rocket arm. I mean, he could throw a ball through a cement wall at 100 feet. And
Right.
I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen an arm as strong as he has, but that's basically about all he has. But they played him today, and he
And he
played
played
great.
great.
He played great, you know. And granted, it's okay. It's a meaningless game at the end of the season, and you know, you're probably not seeing all the starters on the defense and stuff like that. But you look at that and say, well, could this guy develop into an NFL quarterback after all? You know, he certainly has the arm. And that's somebody who was drafted, I think, in the sixth round or something like that. You look at the Giants game, right? And they were playing Tanner McKee. And I don't remember where the Eagles took him, but you know, he looked like a pretty decent quarterback today, you know, and you know, not the most mobile guy around, but he looked composed out there and doing his job. And you know, and you see this often enough in the NFL. The guys drafted after day one or late on day one, if you trade back into the first round, wind up being great quarterbacks. I mean, the prototype for that is Lamar Jackson, who looked like he was going to fall out of round one entirely. And in fact, the Ravens passed on him at number 25 to draft Hunter Henry. And then they traded back up into the first round to grab him at number 32. And people didn't know whether he could be an NFL quarterback. And now I think it's safe to say he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, if not one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. So you just don't know what these guys are going to do. And the one thing I will say about Joe Schoen that I would consider one of his faults is that he has botched the quarterback position, not so much by how he handled Daniel Jones, although we can litigate the Daniel Jones contract, you know, process for another 10 years. But it's what he did behind Daniel Jones, and it was fine when he signed Tyrod Taylor, but never having drafted a quarterback in his first 3 years, I thought was a big mistake. And you again, you look at some of these other teams in the NFL, and they get to day 3, and in the 4th round, the 5th round, the 6th round, they take a quarterback seemingly just for the hell of it as a developmental person, and you see what happens to the guy. And sometimes those guys become decent quarterbacks. You look at a Gardner Minshew. He was a 6th round pick. He actually was a starter for a while in Jacksonville, and he's come in and played some good ball. He can't be your long-term starting quarterback, but if Gardner Minshew was the Giants' quarterback this year after they got rid of Daniel Jones, would they have won more games in the second half? Maybe. You know, so
what happens is you buy yourself time sometimes with guys like that.
Yeah.
The one guy in this last year's draft that maybe falls into that category is Spencer Rattler. And Spencer Rattler played pretty well for the Saints today. 26 of 42, 240 yards with a touchdown pass. Saints lost, but Spencer Rattler would have looked pretty good as a Giants quarterback this year after they had moved on from Daniel Jones. And the thing about that, maybe the Giants would still be in that market where they said, oh, you know, let's go try to get Cam Ward, or if that's the guy that we love or whatever. But maybe that also buys you a year while you're trying to put yourself in position to go find the guy that you really, really want. So, so in some ways I agree with that. That was one guy I would have taken a swing at in the last draft. Anyway, Tony, it will be a very, very interesting day. My intent is to be at the facility tomorrow. I'm still trying to determine what time things are going on there in East Rutherford so that I know what time to get there. It's going to be an early rise for me to make sure that I get there on time.
I think Daboll said he's speaking to the team at 8 a.m. Is that right?
Daboll is speaking to the team at 8 a.m. Having their normal Monday end of season meeting. They'll have their exit meetings, and I'm not sure what time we're being allowed into the locker room after that. And we're also not sure if we're going to get a decision tomorrow on the fates of Schoen and Daboll. And I'll be shocked if Joe Schoen does not keep his job at this point. Just from what we've been hearing and all of that, I think the last thing that John Mara wants to do is completely turn the organization upside down again. And Joe's made his share of mistakes, but I think that John has a good relationship with Joe Schoen. I think that he believes that Joe Schoen can get this right in the long run. And the thing you and I have talked about with Joe Schoen is we don't know. We saw some of it in Hard Knocks, but we don't know exactly what the conversations between John and Joe were in terms of Daniel Jones and in terms of Saquon Barkley and some of those other major decisions. I keep looking at Saquon Barkley and that whole decision, and if John Mara really, really, really wanted Saquon Barkley to be a New York Giant, there were 2 or 3 opportunities where there were only a couple $1 million apart. John Mara could have made that happen. He could have gone to Joe Schoen and said, "You're $2 million apart. Just pay him." Or if he wants, we're offering him $19 million in guaranteed money. If he wants $25 million in guaranteed money, if that'll get it done, just give it to him and get it over with. John could have done that and never did it. So John's got to take some of the, if he thinks it's a mistake that Saquon left, John's got to take a good measure of the blame for that. He can't just hold Joe's feet to the fire for it.
Yeah, I agree. And you don't know. We never saw on. We know that he said it. He'd feel sick or something like that if Saquon went to Philadelphia. But we don't know what his overall opinion of keeping Saquon versus.
Right, but he never said I will lose sleep if he leaves this team. What he said, at least on Hard Knocks, when they knew Saquon was going to leave, what he said to Joe Schoen was, "I think we'll be just fine." So you don't know what other conversations they had. But in terms of Daboll, I don't know if we're going to hear tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to hear on Tuesday. I don't know if the Giants know. It's just, so we'll find out. But I should be there tomorrow. Hopefully I don't have to take a hotel and stay until Tuesday as well. But if that's the way it has to be, then that's the way it has to be.
Yep.
That's why I'll be packing an overnight bag.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tony, I think that's a good place to stop. We'll find out what's happening tomorrow. We'll have all that coverage at Big Blue View, and we'll have a podcast for you as well, probably as soon as I can get one together. So stay tuned for all of that, and stick with Big Blue View. We'll let you know what happens. We'll give you all the opinion and the analysis of whatever decisions the Giants make here going forward. So, Tony, thank you, and thank you for doing these every day after games all season long. So it's always fun.
It's been fun.
Old guys talking ball.
Yeah.
We should rename our segments just Old Guys Talking Ball. All right, Tony. Thank you, Giants fans. Thank you as always. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.